Good evening. In this broadcast, the news from the television company Ostankino. The leaders of more than 50 countries of the world gathered today in the capital of Hungary, Budapest, for a two-day summit of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. Participating in that session are leaders of the majority of CIS republics, including Russia. Post-war Europe has not yet seen such a sight. Leaders of more than 60 European, Asian countries, the United States and Canada, all gathered together in this way and were able to meet and shake hands. Today, in the Budapest Congress Center, this was called a family photograph, but perhaps in advance, because to build a friendly, close-knit family is still far off, but steps to entrench trust, security, broaden cooperation must be taken immediately, especially in the backdrop of what was described here today as a conflict which shocks everyone in former Yugoslavia, Nagorno-Karabakh and other European hotpoints. The tone of the discussion was probably set today by the American President Bill Clinton, emphasizing the growing role of the CSCE, the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. However, the prevention of military conflicts, in the American view, should be the task of the NATO Union, and hence it's necessary to broaden it. New members will be entering the organization, and what's more, they will be doing this freely and calmly. We also feel that NATO should not close its doors to new members. A unique polemic with Bill Clinton was entered into at the session by Boris Yeltsin, warning of the possibility that after the end of the Cold War, a cold peace may be entered. Only the CSCE, with all its institutions, is the basis of a common European system of security. NATO was created in the era of Cold War. Today, it, with difficulty, seeks its place in the new Europe. It's important that this quest not create new division lines, but would bring European unity closer. This logic, in our view, is contradicted by plans to broaden NATO. If, because of this, there is an intention to move the borders of NATO's responsibility close to the borders of Russia, I will say one thing. It's too early to bury democracy in Russia. The Russian president devoted great attention in a speech to ensuring observance of human rights on the continent, having in mind the attacks of aggressive nationalism, which are felt by millions of Russians in certain CIS countries, and especially the Baltic region. And regarding the peacekeeping operations, Russia is interested in sharing with its partners in NATO, the UN and the CSCE, the political and material responsibility in operations to support peace, be they either in Karabakh, Tajikistan, Georgia or Moldova, but of course not to the detriment of the effectiveness of the operation. If one speaks of Karabakh, Russia is against being pushed to the sidelines in regularizing that conflict. Today, Gedar Aliyev, Levon Ter-Petrosyan, after their talks in the press center, walked together arm in arm, and we journalists, perhaps prematurely, saw in this a good sign. Gedar Aliyev, the television company Ostankino. Hello. Was something resolved today with Mr. Ter-Petrosyan? Mr. Ter-Petrosyan and I are attempting to resolve matters. To say that we were successful, no, but in any case, the fact that we are meeting and discussing, exchanging views, conducting talks, this is a positive factor. Why is Mr. Ter-Petrosyan so restrained and silent? You never asked me any questions. They say that Azerbaijan's position is quite rigid. Ours is no worse. Despite the active and quite attractive position occupied by Russian diplomacy here at the session, I must note with some bitterness that Russia, in many of its undertakings in Budapest, remains without support, without the support of even its good old allies. Mostly, in this regard, I have in mind the imminent intention to enter NATO on the part of Eastern European countries and the Baltic areas, nor are we satisfied with the assessment of NATO bombings of Serb positions as an adequate reaction to their attack, which was provoked. And here I'll note especially that in particular the separation of Russian-American positions does not signify cooling in our relations with the United States. In many ways, our interests coincide, as was indicated by one of the culminating events of the day, the joining by Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan to the group of non-nuclear countries. From 13 hours 25 Moscow time, the agreement on restrictions of strategic nuclear weapons has taken force, and Leonid Kuchma, Alexander Lukashenko, and Nursultan Nazarbayev received the assurances of security for their countries from Russia, the United States, and Great Britain. And now about the most volatile Russian problem of the day. A final decision on Chechnya will be made by the Security Council of Russia around the 8th of December. This was stated today by Pavel Grachov. Together with the Minister of Internal Affairs and the Director of the Federal Service of Counterintelligence, the Minister of Defense left today for the Northern Caucasus region in order to organize dialogues with the conflicting sides in Chechnya. The Minister of Defense stated that he is ready to begin these talks as early as tomorrow and intends to meet with Jahar Dudayev and Umar Avturkhanov. In the event that the sides don't agree to go and attend the talks, it's not excluded that a special form of rule will be declared in Chechnya, said Pavel Grachov, and reminded that by decree of the President of Russia, the 15th of December is the absolute deadline set for the conflicting sides to lay down their arms. In order to conduct forceful measures, units of forces and means have been prepared from among the subunits of the Ministry of Defense and the internal forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia and special forces, said Pavel Grachov. Today, the Minister of Defense admitted that Russian planes had launched strikes on objects of Dudayev forces. Pavel Grachov told the Tatas that bomb raids were launched on airports where two 134 planes were located, which had transported to Chechnya mercenaries and weapons. The Minister of Defense, however, categorically disavowed affirmations that ostensibly raids were conducted on residential areas of Grozny. Chechnya continues to balance between war and peace, but the situation in the Republic overall was calm today. In Grozny, in the center of the city, the rally continued. Incidentally, the same people are demonstrating here, and they've probably become quite familiar to our television viewers. A rally was held today also by the residents of Urus-Martan, where the basic forces of the opposition are located. Now, one may surmise that the situation in Chechnya, from a direct armed resistance, is entering the phase of a political battle. In the capital of the Republic, talks are being held simultaneously by several delegations. According to the Temporary Information Center, Grozny leadership did not wish to hold talks in mineral waters, Armavir, Kislovodsk, Pyatigorsk, or Stavropol, but on the other hand, they proposed Vilnius or Vladikavkaz. The Russian Commission, however, was not satisfied with these cities either. The specifying of the venue for talks continues. Jahar Dudayev said today that he will always and remains a supporter of equitable dialogue. According to the Temporary Information Center, citing an anonymous but well-informed source, the Dudayev regime is recruiting foreign mercenaries. Armed terrorist groups are being brought to Chechnya in order to execute diversionary and terrorist acts. A group of terrorists was brought in through the territory of Azerbaijan. The airplane, which was on a second flight delivering mercenaries to Chechnya through that republic, according to the Temporary Information Center, was shot down by the helicopters of the Interim Council. As was reported in the last few days, overall, more than 300 armed terrorists have arrived in Grozny. By commercial flight to the city, members of a Ukrainian national organization arrived, the UNA-UNSA. The president of the Confederation of the Caucasus Peoples, Yuri Shamibov, told a correspondent of Tartas today that from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea, volunteers are being recruited, but the regiments are not headed for Grozny, but for the mountains of the Caucasus. Both chambers of the Russian Parliament, the Federative Council, and the State Duma today announced that they intend within the next few days to discuss the situation in Chechnya. In the Federative Council, this matter will be examined the 6th of December, in the State Duma on the 8th. The position of the Federative Council on the problem of declaring a state of emergency in Chechnya was expounded on today by the Speaker of that chamber, Vladimir Shumeyka. Subunits of border and internal forces, as well as the armed forces of the Russian Federation, are being concentrated along the border with the Chechnya Republic, not to conduct war with the people of Chechnya, but to create an insurmountable barrier on the path of the insurgents into Chechnya of weapons and ammunition and combat technology, and so-called volunteers of various nationalities and various nationalistic and religious tendencies. According to Vladimir Shumeyka, the Federative Council may examine the question of declaring a state of emergency in Chechnya, but not before such time that on its territory, through measures provided by the Constitution, combat activity will cease and all conflicting groups are disarmed. Citing the principle of division of powers, the chairman of the Federative Council declined commentary on the involvement in the Chechnya conflict by the army and special forces of Russia. In the morning, the Council of the Duma met. It was decided Thursday to hold a closed session to discuss the situation in Chechnya. We're very alarmed that there is an attempt to resolve the problem of Chechnya through military means. A statement to the press was made by the leader of the faction, Russia's Choice, Yegor Gaidar. The analysis of the events, as well as direct information from the site of occurrences, permits one to assess the occurrence as an action aimed at destabilizing the situation in Russia. An attempt to foil democratic transformations. In the statement, there was a demand toward the president to decide the question of the measure of responsibility of the Minister of Defense, Karachov, the Director of the FSK, Stepashin, the Secretary of the Security Council, Lobov, and the Minister on Affairs of Nationalities, Yegorov. We are demanding a scrupulous inquiry be launched into the actions of Russian force structures in Chechnya and hold responsible, that includes criminally responsible, all those involved in a criminal venture in that republic. Such actions, Gaidar said, are provocations aimed at the president. The situation must be regularized exclusively through peaceful means. Furthermore, regions of Chechnya, which recognize the jurisdiction and constitution of Russia, must be assisted. Answering questions, the chairman of the Committee on Defense, Sergei Yushchenkov, referring to a conversation with the president, Jahar Dudayev, noted that such an intense issue as the status of Chechnya could be the object of special talks. Today, Sergei Yushchenkov submitted a proposal at the Duma's council to amend the constitution in the area of control functions of the Duma over the activities of figures in authority. And now about the fate of Russian prisoners still in Chechnya. The vice president of Chechnya, Yendar Biev, told Interfax today that the matters have been settled regarding handing over to a delegation of the Liberal Democratic Party currently in Grozny several imprisoned Russian military servicemen. But the chairman of the Duma Committee on Defense, Sergei Yushchenkov, who had previously been in charge of this matter, feels that talks on their release must be conducted on a government level. The London Metals Exchange is shaken with panic connected with the indefinite status on the deliveries of nickel from Russia because of the accident at the heating power station in Norilsk, which provides heat and electrical power to the local metallurgical plant. According to Tartas, the quotations on nickel this week rose by 22%. Russia is one of the world's leading suppliers of nickel. Furthermore, from the overall Russian export, approximately 100,000 tons per year, 80% of that is produced by the Norilsk metallurgical plant. The feed of Turkmenian gas to Georgia will resume either today or tomorrow. This was stated by the head of the republic, Edvard Shevardnadze. He also emphasized that gas will be dealt out first of all to those people who are willing to pay for it. According to Edvard Shevardnadze, Turkmenia has agreed to freeze Georgia's debt for 2 years, and this debt currently is at $383 million. The leadership of Belarus again reminded their disgruntled population that foods in the neighboring Baltic countries and in Russia are more expensive, and this condition is one of the reasons for the workers' impoverishment, since local products in these circumstances drifts directly to the neighbors. In any case, the Belarusian premier demanded the protection for the consumer market of the republic and appealed to the president, Alexander Lukashenko, to reject the policy of restraining prices on foods, especially meats. Local authorities went even further and, despite the protests of the prosecutor's office, gave orders to organs of law and order to inspect all passengers suspected of smuggling Belarusian fat or butter out of the country. But in doing so, there was no mention that such trade is not a means for becoming rich, but some means to survive. The purchase capability of the population is declining so rapidly that this aggravates the productivity crisis. Year to date, the sale of industrial goods has declined by 2 times. And especially noticeable is the decrease in consumption of meat and dairy goods in favor of the relatively affordable and accessible potatoes and bread. According to assessments by the organs of statistics, to purchase food, residents of Belarus spend more than 60% of their salaries, and this, according to international standards, is evidence of the impoverished state of the population. The Prime Minister of Estonia, Andres Tarand, and members of his government responded today to the inquiries by deputies of the State Assembly of the Republic. The Cabinet of Ministers clarified the progress of economic reforms and privatization. The government could not avoid the question on the fate of the Russian rubles, which remained in the republic after a national currency was adopted. The so-called ruble scandal, which emerged in Estonia in the end of the summer when the press reported a major deal involving Russian rubles by the Estonian government had transpired, seems to gain a new momentum. The fact is that to date, official circles and today the now former Prime Minister Mark Laar are attempting to prove that the ruble mass, which remained in the Republic in 1992 after Estonia had adopted its own national currency, belonged supposedly to the Republic. Of the same position is the Commission of the State Control, which recently had published the results of its official inquiry of that matter. However, representatives of the opposition on their part insist and try to prove that Estonia had no right to make a deal with money from a different country. One of the leading newspapers of the Republic published the text of the Russian-Estonian agreement from 1992, wherein it clearly states that Estonia takes on the obligation to return the rubles to the Russian State Bank. As is known, this was never done. Since in the Republic already a pre-election campaign is underway, the publication of new details is expected in the ruble deal, which could negatively affect the authority of political forces which are in power today. There are also demands that the matter be assumed by an official investigative body. The investigation of the ferry Estonia, which sank in the Baltic Sea, continues. Divers conducting the investigation found 2 devices to receive satellite signals and as well the bodies of several passengers, but the black box has not yet been found. The divers are working around the clock and they must complete all their work by Tuesday. The new training year has begun in the Black Sea Fleet. It's being conducted on a full scale, just as in previous years, despite the well-known political and economic problems and the burden of taxes which must be paid to the Ukrainian treasury for being based in Crimea. Currently, all those conscripted arrived in Sevastopol from Russia. Many volunteers, especially for the assisted sponsored ships and for the sea infantry. There was even a competition. The main requirement is excellent health, physical preparedness, and probably character as well. You may become convinced of this watching these shots. The officers will train such youths in the military business properly, as it should be. The combat capability of any army, including the Russian one, depends not only on the numbers and level of preparedness of the personnel, but also on how and with what this army will be armed. It's difficult to imagine that this clump of metal, which weighs only 1 kilogram, is capable of penetrating any model of a contemporary tank. In fact, this is a spearhead of the self-propelled element of the latest Russian cassette-style air bomb, the RBK 500. Upon exploding, the metal head reaches speeds of 2.5 kilometers per second. In the last decades at the plant, such devices have been invented that Western specialists only gape with amazement. For example, the anti-tank grenade PG-7VL from a distance of 300 meters penetrates a steel wall of 300 millimeters and a metal concrete surface of 1,300. But now the issue is not weapons of destruction, without which we cannot do for now, but the money which is lost by not selling them abroad. Incidentally, there can be no discussion about undermining the defense of the country. These bombs are of the 3rd generation. At Basalt, they're developing the 4th. In July 1992, the plant was first to receive government permission to sell any of its ammunition abroad. However, even today, the matter has not moved at all. From the moment when we receive an order from any country until the decision of government is formulated, 6, 8, or 9 months is spent. And we have had cases when there was an order placed and we know that that country really needs it. 6 months would pass by after the resolution of the government is issued, and we inform that country, finally we can deliver this to you, and the country says, no thanks, the political situation has changed, and we don't need that ammunition any longer. Today, in the plant's offices, tens of orders lie idle, but because of the criminal inefficiency of the bureaucratic apparatus, the state treasury hasn't received yet a cent. Furthermore, with many countries, lengthy, dull talks are underway about how and with what they will pay. Meanwhile, the warehouses filled to the brim with ammunition regularly fly up into the air. As well, our money drifts with the wind, and no one benefits. Because of the absence of funds, companies paid before our eyes, such as Basalt, which as well, despite its name, is not made of stone. Bright minds drift away in search of subsistence. Today, in the sector, only half of the number of employees remains. While on the domestic market, military technical goods are not valued properly nor supported properly, foreign consumers are involved in an active search for our developments. A colorful military parade marked the opening in Johannesburg of the exhibit of the South African Military Techniques and Technology, DEXA 94. This exhibit, the largest in Africa and the first after the victory of democracy in South Africa, was opened by the President Nelson Mandela. He stated to thousands of viewers and delegations from 72 countries, including from Russia, that the powerful military industry of South Africa works not for war and aggression as before, but to ensure peace and security in South Africa and in the entire region. A sensation of the exhibit, DEXA 94, was the first showing of the South African military plane, the Mirage, modernized with the aid of a new, powerful Russian jet engine. Because of this modernization, which ends up to be 5 to 6 times cheaper than purchasing new airplanes, the technical characteristics are improving vastly and the life of the Mirages is extended significantly. This project is truly the most fundamental project existing currently between Russia and South Africa, and it has very great promise, since through the aid of this project we can renew all Mirages which are in the third world countries. The Minister of Defense of South Africa, Joe Modiste, spoke at the exhibit with Russian representatives, and later at a press conference, DEXA 94, Joe Modiste stated that the military cooperation of South Africa and Russia will continue to intensely develop in the future. And the South African Mirages with the new Russian engines have already completed around 50 successful test flights. In Bosnia, the situation remains in a dead-end state, and this gives the United States basis to believe that acceptance of the peace plan best answers the interests of the warring sides. This was stated in an interview to the television company CBS. The American Defense Secretary William Perry, the head of the Pentagon, said that if the UN asks NATO to assist in evacuating the peacekeeping forces from Bosnia, the alliance will provide such aid. NATO currently is studying plans to conduct such an operation. The International Contact Group on Yugoslavia has reaffirmed its plan to regularize the Bosnian conflict, thereby stating that the only resolution is possible not on the battlefield but at the dialogue table. The Bosnian sides themselves must decide the constitutional structure of the country and change territorial divisions by mutual agreement. After the meeting of the contact group, the ministers of foreign affairs of the United States, Russia, Great Britain, France, and Germany announced a document in which their unanimous conviction is expressed about the possibility of political resolution of the conflict in Bosnia, despite the continued combat near Bihać. The ministers of foreign affairs of Great Britain and France, Douglas Hurd and Alain Juppé, briefly visited Belgrade, where they spoke with the president of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic. The ministers acquainted the Serb president with the results of the contact group meetings and details of the new document on paths to regularize the Bosnian crisis. To date, the Bosnian Serbs have not yet reacted in any way to the new proposal of the international mediators, while the prime minister of the Muslim government in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Silajic, stated that the Muslim side rejects the modified version of the contact group's plan, according to which the Bosnian Serbs will get 51% of the territory of Bosnia-Herzegovina. According to him, in the previous plan, which was offered to the sides, there should be no changes made. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, Shimon Peres, in an interview to a Russian information agency, noted the positive role of Russia in Middle Eastern normalization. Shimon Peres said that today a new ambassador of Israel will be sent. She is Elisa Shencha, who previously was the rector of the university in Haifa and learned Russian, especially in connection with her future work in Moscow. The Palestinian administration was accused of not fulfilling its undertaken obligations. Previously, the members of cabinet had heard reports from the head of the military intelligence and special services, who assessed the compliance with the agreement Gaza-Jericho. They expressed recommendations regarding talks with the Palestinian Liberation Organization and severely criticized actions of the Palestinian administration. 3 people were killed, 18 injured. This is the result of the bloody drama which unfolded in the center of the Swedish capital. According to the police, 3 unidentified persons opened fire from automatic weapons on a group of Swedes not far from the recreational facility near the square Stureplan in the city center. After that barbaric action, the murderers fled in the direction of an adjacent park and disappeared. When a government bureaucrat is prosecuted for theft, even a minister, in our days, this no longer surprises anyone. But if on the defendant's bench is the prosecutor general himself, then this is a sensation. In this post, Iže Štětino spent 1.5 years, but he gained his fame not by uprooting crime, problem number one in the Czech Republic today, but by constantly condemning the former regime. Any criticism against him, Štětino felt to be covert work of the secret agents of the STB or the KGB, and newspaper articles about his inappropriate activities he called a communist conspiracy. However, his ideological possession could not distort the facts. Today, the former prosecutor general is accused of 3 violations: divulging an official secret, the unlawful operations in currency, which he was involved in, and finally, insulting police on duty. Regarding the last allegation, Štětino was true to his image. Traffic police, who dared to stop him for an intoxication test, he called Bolshevik pigs and other bad names. Especially the Czechs were bewildered by the prosecutor's machinations with housing and currency. Having managed to acquire a luxurious apartment paid for by the state treasury, the top protector of the law veiled the fact that he had a private villa in Prague, which he rents to a Western firm and transfers the money from that to his secret account in Switzerland. The court proceedings will take not less than a month. If all allegations are proven to be true, Iže Štětino could receive up to 5 years in prison. The hierarchical synaxis of the Russian Orthodox Church has ended. Its result was the topic of the press conference held in Moscow. At the Sobor, it was decided that the mission of the Church in contemporary society is to contribute to its moral healing through the aid of the Word of Christ. At the Congress, it was decided to broaden the network of education facilities for clergy and laity. So the independence was confirmed of the Estonian Apostolic, the Lithuanian, and Moldavian Orthodox churches. At the Sobor, again, the principle was emphasized of the non-participation of the Church in politics and clergy in activities of political parties or movements. Specifically, the Sobor insistently admonished Gleb Yakunin to repentance and warned that if he scorned the decision of the Church, the question will be raised of excommunicating him from the Church. Concern was expressed regarding the situation of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the Estonian Apostolic Orthodox Church. The idea was supported to restore the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, but as was especially emphasized at the Sobor, not to the detriment of the people's interests. In the famous village Palach, today festivities are underway on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the Palach art and lacquer miniatures. Exactly 7 years ago, when in the framework of the state ideology atheism was instituted, 7 talented iconographers organized a venture of ancient painting and then began to depict not the faces of saints, but popular heroes of Russian folk tales. In this simple peasant home, once upon a time, drawing his famous flying horses was Ivan Ivanovich Golikov. He was the most talented of the Palach artists, and in such grandiose homes today lives the current art. The difference we see is noticeable, and thank God that finally the Palach artists are reimbursed accordingly. Today, when finally the artists have the freedom of moral choice, they seemed to be very confident of undertaking many things. Each used the freedom naturally as he saw fit. Each goes in the direction in which his soul commands him to go. Some of them go to Arbat with their goods and some to the church. Today, the most astounding is the ease and organized work of the young Palach artists in folk and literary images have turned now to biblical images. And if one speaks of the most impressive work of the last years, unconditionally, that will be the New Testament in Palach colors, 70 plates on events of all 4 Gospels, out of which in the near future a magnificent book will be compiled. Incidentally, in the Art Academy of Palach, everything finally, too, has returned to its original positions. That is, the traditions of Dionysius and Andrei Rublev, although that which was done 70 years ago by Ivan Ivanovich Golikov with his friends, it will also be with Palach forever. True Russia in the capital of the United States. True Russia is an exhibit, just as unusual for Americans as much which is connected with our country. The work of 5 artists and 2 sculptors, Bulgakov, Nazarenko, Nesterov, Orlov, Sitnikov, Baranov, Burganov, are known in our country. In one of the most prestigious display halls of Washington, they're in the Charles Saunders School for the first time. There is no socialist realism. Color and form serve art alone now, not politics, although all the authors of these works passed through this since the beginning of the 70s, the furnaces of party councils. In 1983, the Ministry of Culture of the USSR organized an exhibit of artists in Holland, and this was a mistake. Our embassy there felt that the works did not reflect the Soviet way of life. True Russia was brought to the United States by Russian businessmen. All expenses, tens of thousands of dollars, were taken on by the firm Business Innovations. We thought there are no free breakfasts. There's always something behind it. Evidently, they were mistaken. At the exhibit, True Russia, nothing is for sale. And now in the summary of the basic events of the day, the only thing lacking is the sports news that will come after the ads. All the best. Good evening. In the beginning of the edition about hockey, literally a few moments ago, we received the results of today's International Hockey League matches. The central match of the tournament was held in Yaroslavl, where the local Torpedoes hosted the Army team and defeated them in a stubborn battle 2-1. In the Western Zone, the Dynamos demolished the Severstal 8-0, and Kristal from Elektrostal at home lost to Itil 2-3. In the Eastern Zone, Salavatyulatov beat the Army Air Force 9-4. During these moments in the Cosmos Hotel, the match of the 5th round of the International Chess Olympics are ending. The leaders of the tournament, the Dutch team and the youth team of Russia, parted with an overall count of 2-2. Our top team, headed by Garry Kasparov, beat the Belarusian team 2.5 by 1.5 points. Both women's teams of Russia performed excellently. The first to beat the Greek team 2.5 to 0.5 point, and the second with the same score beat the American team, which unconditionally was quite unexpected. At the Sprinters' Championships of Europe in swimming, the relay of the 4x50 meters, the world record was set by the German quartet, overcoming the distance in 1 minute, 98.1 seconds. In the American city Vale, the Swiss downhill skier Heidi Seller-Baylor won the distance in the supergiant slalom and leads in the overall count of the World Cup, ahead by 32 points of her compatriot Vreni Schneider. The 3-time Olympic champion, the Italian Alberto Tombo, won on the slalom course in the framework of the World Cup underway in the French borough Tignes. After this success, Tombo moved into first place in the overall. Good evening. The warm Atlantic air continues to move into the northern regions of Russia. In Karelia, the Arkhangelsk district, and in the Murmansk district, cloudy, weather with snow, temperature in the night and day from -1 to 6. In the Nenetsk Autonomous District, in the Republic of Komi, and in the Volgovyatsk area, brief periods of snow with some isolated blizzards, temperatures -3 to 8, in northeast Komi, -7 to 12. In the Baltic countries and in the northwest region, also in the Leningrad district, tomorrow it will be cloudy with rain and isolated wet snow. In the morning, fogs, icy road conditions, temperatures during the day +1 to 6. In Belarus and in the west of Ukraine and also in Moldova, in the zone of an atmospheric front, it will be cloudy and rainy in the morning, isolated fogs with icy road conditions, temperatures during the day 0 to +5. In the Rostov district and in the east of Ukraine, there will be some brief isolated snow, temperatures during the day -1 to 6. In central and central Chernozem areas, tomorrow there will be no significant precipitation, but icy road conditions, temperatures at night -5 to 10, during the day -2 to 7 degrees. The anticyclone, which from the central regions will shift to the southeast of the Black Sea, will define the weather tomorrow over the central and lower Volga area in the Stavropol, Krasnodar, Rim areas, and also in the republics of the northern Caucasus. There, they expect partly cloudy skies with some isolated brief snows, temperatures during the day -2 to 7. In the Transcaucasus, during the day, 0 to -5. In Azerbaijan, there will be some isolated brief snow with rain in Georgia and Armenia without precipitation. In St. Petersburg, tomorrow, cloudy with rain and wet snow, temperatures at night around 0, during the day 0 +2. In Moscow and its environs, on Tuesday will be cloudy with some brief periods of snow. Winds are from the southwest. Temperature at night -4 to 6, during the day -1 to 3, with icy road conditions. This is the weather promised for tomorrow by the information of the Oceanic Meteorological Center. All the best.